seen snippets from the life of David, King of Israel. Much has been said about this king, but perhaps the greatest story told about David is the fact that he is a passionate worshiper of God. He worships God as if his life depended on it, even going to the extent of dancing in the middle of the streets naked, despite his kingly position. His commitment to worship God was never prevented by anyone or any circumstances in his life. In modest times and in times of greatness, he never ceased to worship God ardently. He carried out the purpose for which God created him. He worshipped God. You see, God basks in the praise, adoration, and worship of his children. To him, it may be the most beautiful sound. In fact, all the sounds of nature were created for that very purpose, to give glory to its creator. In our lives as Christians, worship is our lifeline. Haven't you noticed that when you give yourself freely to worshiping God in any way you can, you feel more alive, more energized afterward? Well, if your answer is a resounding no, you had better examine yourself, because something might be awfully wrong about your spiritual life. Worship is our spiritual connection to God. There seems to be an invisible cable line from earth to heaven when we worship. In return, that line from heaven seems to transmit unexplainable power. It was even said once by a highly respected preacher that when we worship God truly and freely, He opens the windows of heaven to pour out unto all worshippers all the blessings He intended for them. Worship is also a shield of protection against the power of darkness. For when we sing songs of praises to God, and when we truly worship God in our lives, Satan and his minions scamper away. The worship of God's children are sounds that the powers of darkness could not stand. We need to remember, though, that worship has to be done correctly. We need to worship in spirit and in truth. Worshipping in spirit means the exact opposite of worshipping in the flesh. It distinguishes itself from carnal worship. Spiritual worship is bent more towards pleasing God rather than men or self. Carnal worship, on the other hand, seeks to gratify one's desires and vanities. When we worship in spirit, the objective is to glorify God and to make Him big in our lives rather than drawing attention to ourselves, to our talents, or to our achievements. When we worship in truth, we know the God whom we worship and acts according to that truth. It simply suggests that we live our lives based on what we know and believe about who God is. When we say He is our Creator, then we surrender ownership of our lives to Him. When we say He is our healer, we must believe that any illness has been cured by His stripes. When we say He is holy, we must live holy lives. When we say He is Jehovah Jireh, our provider, then we should never worry about our future. Worship is more than dancing, singing, playing a musical instrument, shouting, or clapping. Worship is a life offered to God in obedience and holiness. When we present our bodies as living sacrifices, then we have genuinely worshipped God, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, to whom all